This video is part 2 of the first one, dealing with the poem I Remember by Thomas Hood. And here we shall talk about the summary and some important details, themes, some more information, some additional points which can be used for writing answers. Therefore, let's start. So, Hood attempts to capture and glorify an essential portion of his life that he believes is filled with enormous bliss and serene timelessness. It's a picturesque portrayal of his recollections of the past, sprinkled with tasteful imagery, which helps him to paint the otherwise mundane poem with a refined, glimmering sense of joy as well as yearning. He starts with his childhood bedroom, with its little window where the sunlight shone in every morning, and he ends with the garden. Now, his recollections in the first stanza take a darker turn, revealing that he now sometimes wishes he had died before attaining adulthood, the implication being that nothing in his life since then has matched his childhood joy. He goes on to describe that the sun was never late to visit him each morning. He personifies the sun there, and at present he wishes that he never woke up to see the sun again. This is a melancholic desire of the poet, displaying his longing to be dead. The first stanza thus acts as a formal introduction not just to the central ideas and themes of the poem, but also to the poet himself. He introduces his persona by referring to himself as I. This gives the poem a personal and more honest touch. So it is a first person narration. He remembers the untroubled childhood and he peeps into the phase of innocent childhood. Now, he examines minutely the simplicity and innocence that forms the very essence of childhood. He juxtaposes this against the gradual loss, decline, and disappearance of the intrinsic virtues of childhood as a result of growing up. This fear of losing the childhood innocence and other remarkable characteristics of childhood make up for the poet's concern with the concept of maturity and adulthood. He believes that in the early years of life, humans are more connected to God, closer to heaven, and the poet even draws on how the constant presence of nature in the form of sun, flowers, and the fir trees acts as a source of contentment and pleasure. Apart from being filled with an idealization of childhood, the poem is a realization that this phase of life must also sadly come to an end. The poem's juxtaposition of the gloomy and uncertain adulthood as opposed to a perfect childhood also makes the narrative universal. The poem is a thematic and picturesque amalgamation of evocatively described series of unique memory snapshots. And in the process, the poet not only reimagines his childhood but also momentarily contrasts each experience with his current, ever-changing adulthood. He contrasts his childhood happiness with his adult despondence and distress. While looking back at the past, he feels the need to seize time or go back in time to a state where he felt safe, content, and free. With every delightful remembrance of his childhood, he unveils the horrors and insecurities of the present day. In the last 4 lines of every stanza, he makes note of the dull life he is subjected to currently. It's a result of this sadness that the speaker makes multiple attempts to find shelter in his memories. Memory, therefore, acts as an escape for the poet from the struggles and harsh realities of adulthood. Another obvious theme is innocence versus experience. The poem is centered around one concrete idea that humans are the most innocent in their formative years, unconcerned and free from the facts of the world. Children live a life that in reality is all pure. Children are the living image of purity that is untainted by everyday concerns and affairs of the adult world. They are the closest to the gates of heaven and therefore to God. He longs to return to the blissful period and remain unbothered there indefinitely. Speaker is regretful for not being able to connect to God as he could being a child. Nature plays a very significant role and introduces the theme of humankind's relationship with nature. The correlation between heaven and nature is another striking theme. The title reinforces the idea and theme of reminiscence. He vividly recollects his past, the time when he was purer in soul and could live his life freely, and highlights his happiness in remembering his bygone childhood days. The poem is set in the poet's bedroom as he nostalgically views his past memories and elevates his former childhood self. It shifts to his garden and then in the present when he is an adult. Talking about the style, it's a passionate, reflective, and thoughtful lyric consisting of 32 lines divided into 4 stanzas. Each stanza is made up of 8 lines divided into 2 quatrains. The rhyme scheme is consistent, with the second and fourth, sixth, and eighth lines rhyming. The consistent rhyme evokes this jovial tone to reflect his idyllic reflection. The poem unfolds how deeply the poet feels about the pleasures of his childhood days. The rhyme scheme followed in each quatrain is AB, CB. He employs a variety of poetic devices like personification, metaphor, alliteration, assonance, enjambment, refrain, etc. The childhood home works as a powerful visual image when placed in the context of childhood memories, proves to be very comforting and pulls the reader's heartstrings. He carefully features the events of an innocent childhood stacked against the harsh realities of the adult world. He mentions his spirit to be flowing in the air effortlessly just as birds, unaware of the burdens of the adult world. He explains how this carefree spirit has been crushed by the weight of unending responsibilities. He successfully uses grappling metaphors to make the shift imperceptibly from joy to melancholy, childhood to adulthood. The most obvious literary technique used is repetition, which can't be ignored by the repetition of the phrase I remember, in every stanza. The anaphoric phrase is repeated at the beginning of each stanza to accentuate the theme of remembrance. The use of enjambment also helps him while comparing his untroubled memories of the past to the unsettling present. He begins with the anaphoric line, which continues to chime throughout the poem, echoing the idea that childhood is the most innocent and nostalgic phase of our lives. It shows how in life Hood has crossed into adulthood, leaving the joys behind, and can never return to his childhood, doomed to live in the present. Thus, Thomas Hood reminisces about his childhood from time to time and looks back on his past. This shows that it is a reflection on how time and distance can change our perception of the past and how we long for the things that we have lost. The speaker is filled with a deep sense of longing for his childhood home and happy memories. The poem also suggests that these memories can be bittersweet, as one can never return to the past and must confront the realities of aging and the passage of time. The poem explores the idea of impermanence as the speaker reflects on how things change over time and how memories can be distorted by the passage of years. Overall, the poem is a poignant meditation on the transitory nature of life and the importance of cherishing the present moment. It is a nostalgic meditation on the passage of time and the fleeting nature of childhood. The language is pretty simple and straightforward, and as the poem progresses, a sense of loss and longing begins to emerge. The somber tone is reinforced by the final stanza, which suggests that the speaker is unable to return to the happiness of his childhood. It is a reflection on the transience of life, and Hood relates his childhood to a bird flying freely as he swings on his favorite tree. The words rush and fresh present the freedom of the period. He has no obligations and is representing his freedom through his association with the lightness with which he flies through the air. The poem is thus a reflection on the fleeting nature of childhood and the nostalgia that accompanies memories of it. It also serves as a reminder of the importance of cherishing the present moment as time waits for none. He concludes by saying that he will always remember his childhood home, the chestnut tree, and the happiness he experienced there. The poet thus seems to conclude by saying that he will always remember his childhood home, the fir tree, all other trees, the birds, the activities of his childhood, and the happiness that he experienced there for the rest of his life.